Welcome to the quiet depth of the autumn woods. Here, two builders are starting from zero to raise a permanent off-grid timber cabin before winter sets in completely. Every structure begins with the harvest. They notch and drop standing timber, immediately stripping the lichen-covered bark with a drawknife. Removing this outer layer while the wood is green prevents rot and deters insects from nesting in the cambium. As the temperature drops and snow arrives, the raw materials are dragged to the site. The stripped logs cure slightly in the cold, hardening the outer grain. With the footprint measured, breaking ground means committing to the location. The foundation must anchor beneath the frost line. With the concrete piers set, the focus shifts to the floor framing. A wooden wedge driven into a corner joint forces the timbers into strict alignment, locking the assembly through pure friction. Vertical support posts bear the massive compressive load of the upper frame. Instead of metal hardware, the builders rely on wooden pegs, or trunnels, hammered into handbored holes. These pegs swell and shrink with the surrounding logs, creating a joint that tightens over time rather than pulling apart. Refining the notches with a chisel ensures flush contact between surfaces, which is critical for structural stability. A taut string line dictates the true horizontal axis. Every subsequent timber must reference this perfect level, or the entire cabin will drift out of plumb as it rises. The corner joints are the anchor points of the entire structure. Using a hand-cranked brace and bit, they bore clean channels through the overlapping timbers. It is a slow, methodical process that demands physical leverage, but it yields a much cleaner whole than high-speed power tools. Rough shaping is handled with a felling axe, biting off large waste sections to create a flat seating surface. A drawknife then shaves the face smooth. This tight tolerance stops drafts from penetrating the corners. As the walls climb, lifting the green logs requires synchronized effort. A wooden dowel secures the course, while ratchet straps temporarily clamp the timber down. Compressing the wood before pegging guarantees the joint seats fully. Every course adds immense weight, effectively locking the lower logs into an immovable grid. The structure is now heavy enough to withstand severe wind loads. Reaching the upper courses forces the builders off the ground. Lifting heavy timber above shoulder height shifts the center of gravity, demanding careful balance on the scaffolding. The final horizontal logs act as top plates, tying the vertical walls together and providing a stable base for the roof framing. Up here, carving notches requires controlled chisel strikes against the end grain. The wood is dense, and removing the waste cleanly takes patience. Seating the upper joists locks the perimeter into a rigid box. When the final wall log drops flush into its saddle, the load path is complete. The cabin can now support the downward thrust of a heavy roof. Once the ridge beam is established, the skeletal frame of the roof begins to spread. Each rafter must be precisely cut to match the roof pitch, ensuring water and heavy snow will shed rather than pool. Hammering the rafter into the ridge locks the timber in tension. Plywood sheathing goes up next, transforming the open rafters into a solid diaphragm. Lifting full sheets onto an angled pitch is awkward, forcing the crew to use ropes and coordinate from above and below. Nailing the plywood ties the independent rafters together, drastically increasing the lateral shear strength of the entire roof. This continuous wooden surface will serve as the crucial substrate for the final waterproofing layers. With the decking finished, the exterior's defense begins. Carrying corrugated metal panels through dense brush is cumbersome, as the thin edges can easily fold or catch on branches. Up on the pitch, a synthetic blue underlayment has already been rolled out to block condensation. The green metal sheets are then aligned and fastened down. Using screws with rubber washers is vital here. As the fastener tightens, the rubber compresses, sealing the penetration against rain and melting snow. Working on a sloped metal surface requires careful footing, especially as the material reflects the daytime heat. The final piece is the ridge flashing, capping the peak where the two roof planes meet. Applying a continuous bead of silicone sealant along this seam blocks. Wind-driven rain from blowing back under the metal. The structure is finally dried in. Inside, the focus shifts to retaining the heat. A clear plastic vapor barrier is taped directly over the floor joists, blocking ground moisture from rising into the living space. Plywood subflooring is then drilled firmly into place, creating a rigid walking surface. Around the future wood stove, standard wood cannot survive the radiant temperatures. The builders switch to cement board, scoring and snapping the dense panels to create a fire-safe perimeter. Unlike plywood, cement board provides an inert, non-combustible base. Mixing dry mortar requires the right ratio of water to achieve a thick, workable paste. This mortar will anchor the heavy thermal mass of the hearth. Trimming the protruding log ends flush creates a clean, architectural corner. To protect the raw timber from ultraviolet decay and moisture, the builders brush a deep brown stain across the exterior walls. The pigment acts as a sunscreen, while the oil base repels seasonal rain. Cutting a penetration through a newly finished roof is always a precise operation. Tin snips easily slice through the thin-gauge metal to make room for the chimney pipe, passing the insulated flue up through the rafters. They secure a specialized metal flashing over the corrugated ribs. Driving screws directly into the high points of the ribs ensures the fasteners remain elevated above the main path of water runoff.
What the fuck?
The hearth requires durable thermal mass. Flat fieldstones are laid into a thick bed of mortar inside a wooden form. As the wood stove burns, these heavy stones will absorb excess heat and slowly radiate it back into the cabin long after the fire dies down. Smoothing the grout lines keeps ash and debris from accumulating in deep crevices. With the interior warming up, enclosing the envelope becomes the priority. Prefabricated window units are pushed into the rough openings and secured from the inside. Yellow fiberglass insulation is packed into the stud cavities, trapping pockets of dead air to block thermal transfer. Finally, a heavy, custom-built wooden door is swung on metal hinges. Dropping the pins into place seals the main entryway, officially turning an open shelter into a secure home. Winter has fully arrived. Exterior window casing is nailed into place, covering the expansion gaps and directing water away from the vulnerable sill. Handling cold metal, flashing, in freezing temperatures makes the material stiff and difficult to cut. Using a hole, saw, and tin snips, they fabricate custom drip edges to protect the roof fascia. Even as the primary cabin stands complete, the work continues outside. Expanding the footprint means processing more timber. Deep notches are chopped and chiseled into fresh logs, clearing the waste for complex saddle joints. This secondary framing will support a covered porch, providing a sheltered transition zone between the harsh winter weather and the warm interior. Marking the cut lines with a steel square ensures the geometry remains flawless.
On. Let me know when you're ready. Ready. Okay, we're in. Lift up just a little bit more. Okay, this one's pretty much in. Here we go. Hey.
The porch roof receives the same underlayment and green metal siding as the main structure, shedding heavy snow away from the entrance. Back at the walls, the final and most critical weatherproofing phase begins: chinking. Metal mesh is wedged into the gaps between the logs to provide a strong backing. A thick layer of gray mortar is then troweled over the mesh. This flexible compound bridges the irregularities of the natural timber, creating an airtight, elastic seal that moves with the wood as it expands and contracts. The cabin is now a fully closed system. What began as standing timber in an empty clearing is now a fortress against the cold. Every notch, peg, and chinked seam operates together to hold back the elements. The landscape provides the material, but careful foresight provides the shelter. Some structures belong exactly where they were built.